Imagine showing up to an all-you-can-eat buffet. You've paid your entry fee, you walk in, but you quickly realize the kitchen is completely out of actual ingredients.
There's absolutely no food left anywhere.
None. But to keep you from walking out the door, the manager just starts handing out permanent free meal coupons to everyone in the restaurant.
Right, and when you finally sit down at your table, the waiter brings out a single parsley leaf.
And they price that leaf at 100 of your new coupons. Today, we are exploring the terrifying premise that the global economy is currently experiencing a fatal systemic bug, a complete decoupling of currency from physical reality.
And I think we really need to frame the central question here. Are we just experiencing a cyclical macroeconomic misalignment? Or are we witnessing the terminal collapse of what the material calls linear capitalism?
It is a terminal collapse. Linear capitalism is a mathematically impossible operating system. We are running infinite debt loops on finite physical resources, and we have to replace it with circular capitalism to ensure sheer survival.
Well, I approach this completely differently. I'll be arguing that while the current system obviously suffers from severe structural inefficiencies, fiat mechanics can be recalibrated. We don't need a total abandonment of the framework to internalize these costs.
A recalibration is a delusion. Let's look at the buffet again. The currency is completely detached from the physical acquisition cost of resources. It is no longer a measure of value.
But it's an abstraction. Those coupons represent a claim on future productivity.
They represent an organized dilution of currency to hide the fact that the kitchen is bare today. It's a tool for systemic self-preservation.
Look, I get the severity of the inflation we're seeing, but rejecting the entire system as a terminal collapse it's ignoring how human coordination works. The coupons are a bet on future agricultural technology that will yield 1,000 fields of that parsley.
You are treating physical reality like a minor accounting variable. The source material frames this much more accurately. The current economy is a bugged open-world game and MMORPG suffering from hyperinflation.
The video game analogy it's a bit reductive, don't you think?
It is exact. The ruling class, the system admins, operate in hidden stages using an infinite gold glitch.
You're talking about quantitative easing?
Quantitative easing and endless credit creation. They generate trillions with a keystroke requiring absolutely zero thermodynamic effort. Meanwhile, the public is forced into stamina-draining slave quests.
But
weeding the startup village just to afford basic survival potions that have artificially jumped 10,000 times in price.
You have to look at the historical context of that so-called glitch. Quantitative easing wasn't some malicious hack to ruin the server. It was an emergency server patch.
It broke the math of the game.
If they hadn't injected that liquidity in 2008 or 2020, the entire financial architecture would have locked up. A total economic freeze. And who do you think suffers absolute devastation when supply chains halt?
The players who are currently trading a decade of hard physical labor for a single loaf of bread.
No, but
the admins announce a new area is unlocked, but the map edges are visibly crumbling. The players are trapped in a tiny starting area, trading legendary swords that have zero physical utility for 100 million gold pieces just to survive.
That's a problem of where the wealth anchored, not the mechanism itself. The wealth generated by that emergency patch became rock-anchored in real estate.
Because the system demands accumulation.
But we can fix that. If we implement proper gold sinks, targeted taxes, carbon pricing, we can siphon that liquidity back into the productive economy. We can balance the mechanics without shutting down the server.
Every time the admins attempt a denomination, a forced reboot of the currency, they funnel the recovered gold right back into useless public works or bailing out the top players.
A targeted tax doesn't inherently have to fund useless works. We can use it to...
It inevitably does, because the system is built to extract. You are acting like a quack doctor treating a severely constipated patient.
Okay, let's hear this one.
The global economy is blocked. Wealth cannot circulate. A real doctor would administer a laxative for circulation and redistribute it based on actual physical need.
Right, but
the central banks refuse the laxative. They endlessly administer financial IV drips.
because pulling out the IV drip...
Refuse the laxative because clearing the blockage means lowering the game rank and asset values of the top players.
Wait, listen to the physiological consequence of your laxative. If you pull the IV drip out immediately, you trigger a catastrophic systemic detox, a massive asset bubble collapse.
The bubble is already mathematically unsupportable.
If you instantly repeg currency to physical resources, the financial system goes into cardiac arrest. The slow transition, the continued easing, it's a rational attempt to manage sunk costs without triggering a global depression.
A rational attempt to manage sunk costs. That is the logic of a man falling from a 100-story building. He passes the 50th floor and yells, "So far, so good. The wind feels great."
Come on, that's incredibly cynical.
To accelerate his fall, he strips off his own clothes and sets them on fire. And when people tell him he's going to hit the pavement, he yells, "If you have time to complain, figure out how to fall faster than me."
Look, I understand the gravity of the physical limits.
If the system can be patched, why isn't Earth repair factored into GDP?
Well, we don't currently have the global accounting framework to.
It is absent because destruction is mathematically more profitable. Linear capitalism is an arsonist economy.
Let's unpack what you mean by that.
A company that specializes in repairing broken windows maximizes profit by hiring thugs to smash every window in the city.
The classic broken window fallacy.
If they install unbreakable glass, their revenue stream ends. They say, "If the windows are strong, our job is over." Under this system, a firefighter who extinguishes a blaze generates less GDP than an arsonist who sells matches.
You're framing this purely as malicious self-preservation. But structurally, the limitation is the lack of a pricing mechanism for negative externalities.
The mechanism exists. It is actively suppressed to maintain artificial scarcity.
To base currency on natural capital, the actual physical state of the environment, requires unprecedented global consensus. You're asking to rebuild the airplane's engine while it's in midair.
You cannot rebuild an engine midair when its operating instructions dictate it must consume the aircraft's wings for fuel.
The engine isn't forced to consume the wings.
It mathematically is. Fiat money is created as interest-bearing debt. You need more money tomorrow simply to service the interest on the money that exists today.
Yes, debt requires growth.
Which means you must pull forward and physically consume tomorrow's Earth just to pay today's interest. It is a thermodynamic impossibility.
But growth doesn't have to equal physical consumption. Look at the energy return on investment over history. Technology redefines physical scarcity. We can dematerialize the economy.
Dematerialization is a statistical mirage.
No. Software, services, AI, they expand GDP without strip mining the Earth.
Every digital service requires massive physical server farms, rare earth extraction, gigawatt cooling systems. You cannot abstract away physical, thermodynamic reality through financial engineering.
But the efficiency per dollar is undeniably improving.
Improving efficiency only accelerates the rebound effect. When the physical Earth hits absolute extraction limits, the system turns inward. It cannibalizes its own population.
That's a huge leap.
It artificially inflates housing, healthcare, basic nutrition. The admins destroy the value of the player's money just to increase their own cut, forcing the public into endless quests just to tread water.
Look, your circular framework, where accumulation is banned and value is tied to immediate resource limits, it completely removes the incentive structure that built the modern world.
It removes the incentive structure that brought us to the brink of ecological collapse.
How do you mobilize human labor at scale without the promise of ownership? How do you fund a 20-year rollout of fusion energy if capital cannot be aggregated and protected?
The price mechanism you defend assigns maximum value to destruction and zero value to homeostasis.
The existing framework, for all its flaws, coordinates complex human action.
The action being coordinated is the systemic acceleration toward the pavement. The admins dictate you aren't earning enough because you aren't weeding the starter village fast enough.
That threat of starvation was the default state of humanity before the system existed. The Fiat abstraction pulled billions out of poverty. We built hospitals and sanitation grids on this OS.
And now the OS is burning the hospitals for fuel.
Which is why we must pivot. We reform the tax code, we put a hard price on carbon, we iterate on the existing system rather than waiting for a forced reboot that guarantees violence and chaos.
The violence is already here. It is the invisible violence of currency dilution. When admins print currency to manage your sunk costs, they steal the life, energy, and time of those doing physical labor. It is a bet against physics.
We are betting on human adaptability. Using the very tools of financial abstraction you hate to fund environmental restoration is a far more viable path forward. We can make the firefighter earn more than the arsonist.